I want to bring in South Dakota Republican Senator Mike Rounds, who joins us now. So, Senator, you just heard from Senator Klobuchar. I mean, is that the case? Do you all not have the votes? I mean, where are you on the procedural vote process right now?
I think the most recent information that we have is that we have a commitment for the votes. But in order to get to that commitment, there are some amendments that some people want to make sure that they can offer. But anytime you make an amendment to a bill like this, you've got to know what the score is. And I think what's going on is they're trying to make sure that the scores on their amendments are appropriate and that they'll fit within the confines that the bill calls for. So no cause for alarm for those average American homeowners out there that are concerned about the loss of a $2,400 tax credit that they have coming otherwise. But that's the big issue here right now for most of us is for most families in South Dakota, if we don't pass this bill, their taxes will go up by about $2,400 next year. And that's what's pushing this whole issue. So for us, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is critical. We want to get it across the finish line. There's other things that go along with it, which is the debt ceiling extensions so that we don't have a shutdown to government. And in the meantime, we've got a lot of folks on our side of the aisle that want to see some reforms made to Medicaid. But it takes amendments. We look forward to an open amendment process. That'll take a long time to get through because I think Republicans and Democrats alike are going to want to make amendments once we get on the bill.
And, for context as well, if you look at the score, so to speak, essentially you can't afford to lose more than 3 Republicans at this point. And we do know at least Senator Tom Tillis, Senator Rand Paul, Senator Ron Johnson all seem to have issues at the moment for their own various reasons. But one major sticking point, as you pointed out, are some of the proposed changes to Medicaid. And the Senate version does go a step further than the House version. That bill has exemptions for all parents and caretakers. Your exemption is only for parents with children under 14. Why do you believe that change is a necessary addition to what the House has already passed?
I think part of it was to identify if somebody's got kids that are 16, 17, or 18 years old, should they be expected to be working if they can? And I think, if you ask the average American out there that sees $37 trillion in debt, should we find a way to reduce the increased costs that we see in Medicaid? Should someone go back to work? And I think most taxpayers would say, look, I'm working full time. I've got kids in school. If you're not employed right now and you've got kids that are over the age of 14 and we need those workers back in the workplace, we want you to go back to work. And I think that's really where it's just a matter of defining at what age they should go back to work. The important part on this is that if you're taking care of someone with a disability and so forth, we don't expect that. If you've got a young child under the age of 14, we don't expect you to be working. But I think most taxpayers out there say, look, there's a reasonableness to this. And our point here is we're not actually cutting Medicaid. What we are doing is significantly slowing down the increase in growth in Medicaid over the next 10 years. And that's our goal. We've got to get it survivable. And in the meantime, we've got to get this economy rolling again, and we don't want to have a significant increase in the taxes that average Americans pay. And there is a tax increase coming if we don't pass this Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We want to make it permanent. Right now, it expires at the end of next year.
And of course, that'd be a continuation of the temporary tax cuts that were put in place back in 2017. And whether it's a decrease in the rate of increase on Medicaid, bottom line, it is expected to affect over 8 million people over the next decade, with some, including one mother of 5 who wrote to Senator Josh Hawley, for example, who argued Medicaid was critical to keeping her 9-year-old daughter alive. And I've heard from Republicans who say, look, these changes will just focus coverage down to those who really need it. But do you also worry that there are people who could slip through the cracks here and be left in an untenable situation?
We've done our best to not let that happen. And so the coverages that we have in Medicaid for that lady that has 5 kids and so forth, there's 2 parts to it. Number one is we want to make sure that for an individual like that has kids that may have disabilities and so forth, that's what Medicaid was intended for. We understand that. We want to maintain that. But there's another piece to this as well. That young mom may very well have refundable tax credits that are included in this bill that she would not get. And that's cash coming back directly to her that she would lose if we don't pass that portion of the bill as well. So we're trying to balance this. We know we've got almost $37 trillion in debt. And yet at the same time, for those working individuals that are out there, we want to make sure that they keep a little bit more of their money as well. And I think that this lady that was talking about it, number one, yeah, we don't want to have anybody fall through the cracks. We're going to do our best not to have that happen. We don't believe that any of the provisions that we're putting in would let that happen. But most certainly we also want to make sure that in terms of just cash in their own pocket, with the refundable tax credits, that they have those available as well. And sometimes we don't do a very good job of talking about that either.
You know, another reason we are seeing some hesitation, at least for Republican support, is over the addition to the national debt, at least as projected by the Congressional Budget Office. We've heard those concerns from Senator Ron Johnson specifically. Are you as concerned with adding to the national debt deficit here as Senator Johnson seems to be with this? Because the CBO analysis does say they take into account the economic effects that this legislation would, in theory, bring as well. But it seems like you and Senator Johnson, for example, aren't on the same page in regards to that front.
Yeah, look, Ron is bright. He's a businessman. He understands a ton of this. He really does have a concern that we should be making more cuts, that we should be going more deeply into a lot of the programs and actually taking more time to ferret out more areas that we can reduce. We're simply out of time for doing that in terms of making more cuts. And the other piece on it, though, is in the past, the CBO, when they make their estimates, they don't use a program called dynamic scoring. We're using some of the same people that did the dynamic scoring back in 2017. Their scoring was better than the scoring coming out of CBO. And that's the point that we're trying to make is that when you extend this and you do some more things, like allowing families to have a bigger child tax credit, they spend that money in the economy and they continue to let that economy grow. We're also making some changes in the regulatory aspects that impact businesses that will bring more businesses back into the United States and hopefully allow them to grow faster. That's our goal, is to grow this economy faster than what our debt is growing while slowing down the increases that really have driven that portion of the debt. Nobody on my side of the aisle wants to hurt people. What we want to do is to try to get this on a sustainable level long term, and this is the one opportunity that we have to do it. We do look forward to working with our Democrat colleagues when it comes to an appropriations process where Congress actually has a chance with 60 votes in the Senate to do the appropriations across the floor of the Senate this year, and that's a chance for us to really get in, debate, and decide which programs we want and which programs we're going to cut this coming year as well. But it'll be bipartisan in nature at that point.
And Senator, just as you've been speaking, we've been showing live images of the Senate floor. It doesn't seem to be that crowded right now. What kind of night are you preparing for? Are you preparing to vote in the next 2 hours, or are you thinking this is going to go much later?
No, I think what will happen is we'll have one vote probably within the next, any time now. We thought it might be 5:30, 6 o'clock. Now I'm assuming they'll probably extend it out another 15, 20 minutes. They're waiting for some scores on some amendments so that folks feel comfortable on voting to the motion to proceed. Once that happens, I think it'll be either 50 or 51 votes on the motion to proceed. I think we'll be successful. And once that is complete, then our Democrat colleagues can decide, are we going to make the staff stay overnight and read the entire 900-page bill? Or will they say, look, let's take that time that they would normally be reading it, let our staff go home, get a good night's sleep, and then allow our own staffs to be able to actually read through, because there is a lot of stuff there to read, 900 pages. And we started on it last night going through just checking, dotting I's and crossing T's. And I think that the Democrats can do the same thing if they want. They've already decided they're not going to vote for it anyway, so it'll be more Republicans reading the fine print than they will be. But this is their right. They can delay it. If we make a deal and we say, let our staff go home and we'll wait 15 hours before we begin, that might be a possibility. Once that happens and that part of it is complete, then we have 20 hours of debate, equally divided. I don't think Republicans will take their time, it may take a few hours. Democrats can take all of their time, which means you add 10 more hours onto it before you get into the vote-a-rama itself. On the vote-a-rama, it is unlimited amendments. You start and you don't quit until people are exhausted. Yeah. And during that time, the Republicans will have amendments to put in, Democrats will have amendments to put in. It'll be back and forth. And when we're all done with that, then you have a final vote on the bill, up or down. So we got a long couple of days ahead of us yet, but we will be successful in the end. That's my prediction.
And Senator, just before we go, I want to get your input on President Trump calling off trade talks with Canada, just because I know that they're your biggest trade partner there in South Dakota. Do you have any concerns on that front, especially as we approach that July 9th deadline for reciprocal tariffs?
Yeah, look, I think the president is a good negotiator himself. He's mentioned several times that with regard to our Canadian friends, they're nasty negotiators, but I suspect that he would love to have them negotiating for him instead of against him at times as well. We'll work that through, we'll get it taken care of, and this will get back on target again. But they're our best friends, they are our allies. We'll work through these, and you know, they put a little tax in there on some of our technical companies and so forth, and it's time to maybe visit that a little bit and make them come back around, but make a deal with us. He's just notifying kind of that shot over the bow that he didn't like it, and we want to get it straightened out right now. So the trade as usual with some guys who are really good negotiators on their own part as well.
All right. Senator Mike Rounds, really appreciate you taking the time. Best of luck with that marathon ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate it.